Hello, my name is Shelby Dumaine, and I'm here with redM today with David, Reid, and Noel Thomas.
Yeah. Hey.
Can y'all? Well, I actually. Sorry, David.
Yeah, just ignore me.
You're kind of old news.
I'm
we know
old
about
news.
you.
What
I'd like
about
to.
this dude?
Noel, can you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself? And we have your book here. We're going to be discussing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Noel Thomas. I'm the founder of Dark Watch and author of Dark Traffic. Very passionate about disrupting modern day slavery around the world, bringing technology to the front lines in the fight against human trafficking.
That's
that
right.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And this book, I think it's really fascinating, is kind of a tool in itself. Can you talk about how writing this, the book is something that somebody can read and then action on?
Yes, absolutely. So we wanted to use the book as a way to get people to think about human trafficking in a new light, to understand the sophistication behind it, how the money is moved, how the people are moved, and what they can do in their local communities and how they can start a conversation around this. And so this has been a field manual to an abolitionist looking to fight human trafficking.
Yeah, well, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I noticed that term when I've read a little bit of it. I'm not finished yet. I probably will be finishing it tonight. It's so great. The term abolitionist, I think a lot of people hear that and they think, well, we haven't needed those since the 1800s.
Right,
So what do you mean when you say a modern day abolitionist?
Yeah, I would say that the slavery has taken on a new face, and so it looks different than it might have in the past, but we have more slaves around the world today than during the time of the transatlantic slave trade. So somewhere upwards of 50 million people enslaved around the world in a $150 billion industry that fuels cartels and terror and organized crime more broadly.
So your angle. So that's the book. Give us a bit more. Maybe how you got there. Let's start with that. How you've got a book, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you didn't just sit down and go, you know what? I think I'll write a book about this thing. So what's your journey like?
Oh, well, this is a pretty wild journey. So for me, it started as a child, and our family was walking in this indoor market. My dad gets bumped by a lady, and she says, "Oh, nice polo that you're wearing." And in that split second, he looks down, and he noticed that my 4-year-old sister was gone.
Wow.
And so thankfully, he trusts his instincts. He runs towards the exit. A man is walking out the door with my sister. My dad grabs my sister, and the man runs off. And so I was about 8 or 9 at the time, and that leaves a deep impression on you. So I asked my sister when I was writing this book, I said, hey, we don't have to put your story in here. Obviously, this is your story. But if you want to, we can use that as part of this tool. And she said, I would love for people to really understand this and use that story as a way to bring good. So fast forward, playing in a rock and roll band, and I'm traveling over.
As you do.
As one does, yeah.
Overseas and right.
Touring the world.
Touring the world. I happen to be in Scotland,
As you do.
and I get to meet David's daughter over there in Scotland. And it was while I was on this tour that I get this flyer on human trafficking, and I had heard about clean water and social justice issues and all these things, but I really didn't know much about human trafficking in 2007, 2008. And so I get this flyer. This is starting to connect with maybe this childhood experience, and this passion is starting to well up. So I wanted to actually see it firsthand, and at the time, I had the mindset, oh, this only happens, everywhere else in the world. So we go to India, and when we're in the brothels of New Delhi, we see this 14-year-old girl that's kept above this police station, iron bars. The police are actually helping navigate traffic and facilitate this. And that quote that says that all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing, it struck me.
Yeah.
So I started a nonprofit. We started raising awareness, and it was while I was in Houston with David, his wife, B, that I really got exposed to domestic trafficking. And so
Not that we weren't trafficking. Just
right,
to be clear.
exactly. To be clear,
To be clear.
you were doing the work to fight against it, and I think I had that misconception, like most people, that this is only somewhere else. This is never right in our backyard. And it was a rude awakening on FM 1960 one night in the middle of the night where we were going and looking at these establishments where people were being sex trafficked here in the United States.
Yeah.
And I think it was really hard to comprehend exactly what I was seeing in that moment, but it continued to open my eyes to this underbelly of sex trafficking and crime that exists right below society and sometimes in plain sight. And so that's kicked off a lifelong passion to fighting human trafficking and bringing these technologies to the front lines of it.
And with that technology, I was reading a little bit that it's Darkwatch uses data, uses technology. Can you explain that a little bit about how y'all are using that to fight sex trafficking?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of this human trafficking is occurring in plain sight. Everyone thinks, oh, this is only on the dark web, right? Or in these hidden corners of society. But in this case, we're actually scraping data that's publicly available. And we say that it's kind of like a Yelp site where people go and review the commercial sexual acts that they're receiving in these illicit massage facilities. And so we're able to scrape that data, analyze it, plot it on a map. And for a lot of people, they're seeing that for the first time, this 670 illicit massage brothels in Houston.
Yeah, we actually did an event before this, and a lot of people from Houston watching. You were saying you've never seen so many people put their phones up to take a picture to understand that, and the conversation, if it's near my work, it's near my home, it's that was really
Schools
it was
and
really
churches,
interesting. People just seeing that many. Historically, we've thought there was maybe 250 operating in Houston. So to be over the 670 mark, and just see those dots on the map, it's really shocking. And so that's, you produce that, and what do you do with it? How does that work?
So a lot of different community groups will use that to rally their base and say, hey, you know what? This is also in our backyards, and we want to do something about it. I heard that today when we presented this map. It's like, wow, I've never really thought about it in that way, or saw it in this corridor, so close to my work or the areas that I'm working. And that map is a great way of galvanizing a community of like, okay, we've got to do something in our backyards, and we got to do something now. So that's a great starting point. We work with a lot of nonprofits with that data, but we've also worked very closely with the government, law enforcement specifically, providing them the intelligence on these organized crime groups that are behind these illicit massage. And then on top of that, we also give that data to the banks, because there's a huge money laundering arm that comes through these illicit businesses that flows through our financial system. And so as part of these anti-money laundering programs, the banks are required to look for this, and oftentimes don't have the technology or tools to do so. And so recently there was this case with JP Morgan where they paid out $290 million in a lawsuit for having inadequate protections for stopping sex trafficking.
Wow. So your data system sounds like there's a lot of demand for people who otherwise it just wouldn't be there, right? So you're doing all this scraping work. Is that the most of what you're doing, is actually going in and looking at reviews, or are there other things that you look at? Yeah,
so that's kind of the starting point, is scraping all of this data, and we have a team that's ex-intelligence, pros and members, and so they've taken their skill sets, their special set of skills, and looking for terrorist groups, and applied that to finding sophisticated human trafficking groups. And so these guys are coming with a lot of expertise and knowledge and methods of how to do this. And so what we'll do is, we'll take a data point like an illicit massage brothel or something like this, and then we'll just pull it to the nth degree. And it's amazing the connections that you'll find to money laundering. You'll find these other crimes. We tell this story of a car wash that we had surfaced with our tools and team. And this car wash was involved in sex trafficking.
Wow.
The Johns were actually getting serviced as they were, hidden in this car wash. But we pulled the threads like we do on this data with these methods, and we started finding weapons and drugs that were connected. The intel that we provided led to the arrest of 9 individuals and brought indictments down. But the challenge with any sort of law enforcement group when they're looking at this is they look at this in silos. So they see drugs, they see money laundering, they see, human trafficking and sex crimes, but there aren't a lot of groups that are seeing the full picture of crime. But when you pull the thread on human trafficking, it links to these other crime types.
So the people behind this are involved in drug trafficking, gun trafficking, I guess that's the term. And it's the same people?
Same people, or even moving into more cyber realms, cyber frauds, sextortion, these other types of crimes that occur in cyber. So if you think about them, they're entrepreneurs in the worst sense of the way. Is that they're exploiting human misery for profit, and whatever that looks like. If it's moving fentanyl today, it's sex trafficking tomorrow, it's labor trafficking, it's these whole wide range of crimes. But if you think about it, it makes sense because a drug or a weapon can only be sold one time. But a victim of sex trafficking can be sold up to 20 times per day.
Yeah, wow.
So the business model is more lucrative on the human trafficking side than these other angles. And because a lot of these individuals that are over 18 fall through the cracks, no one's looking for them. People don't know how to do these types of investigations that involve organized crime behind human trafficking. These groups profit tremendously off of the lack of knowledge and expertise. And so you'll see them actually move away from their guns and drugs business to move into...
because it's more lucrative.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a big growing area? There's tons of trafficking? Or what are you seeing? You're mapping it all the time. Do you see growth?
Absolutely, because the economics behind it are going to continue to fuel it. Some are saying that it could be 250 billion or 300 billion in illicit trade. We know that this other form of human trafficking that's rising called pig butchering, it's this scam involving crypto and labor trafficking to conduct these romance scams, is about $50 billion a year.
Wow.
And so you're seeing these kind of new forms of trafficking pop up where someone used to be sex trafficked and now they're being forced to commit these scams or frauds against other people.
Yeah. And you made a really excellent point in the book that an angle I'd never thought of, which is a lot of times sex crimes are really hard to prosecute, whereas money has a trail. Money almost always leaves a thread, and you can get people for money laundering or tax evasion and stuff like that. And so that's where y'all are kind of coming in, it seems, and connecting those, and like you said, pulling that thread and showing how they connect. I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, it was like, when they wanted to move the 5 families out of New York, they used RICO racketeering to do so. And when they got Al Capone, they used the tax evasion laws to get them.
Yeah.
And so part of what we're trying to do in the education with this book is get people to think of this as a financial crime. And so, of course, we want the sex trafficking charges to stick. We want labor trafficking charges to stick. But we want them to level up on, taking the assets of these traffickers and pouring it into nonprofits that are doing great work in the community, and using the tools that they picked up from the war on drugs and the war on terror, and just applying it to the new threat, which is organized human trafficking.
Right.
You said cybersecurity earlier. Can you give me some depth on that? How is that affecting businesses and companies, and how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, with human trafficking sophistication evolving, one of the things that we're noticing with the illicit massage is that they're oftentimes near sensitive or critical infrastructure,
Oh, really?
sensitive military installations. And so this presents a problem when, we talk to law enforcement, they go on a raid. When they go into these facilities, they're finding audio and video recording devices. So now you have got someone that has sensitive information that's going into these places thinking that they're getting commercial sex, but in the meantime, they're being filmed and possibly extorted or blackmailed outside of this. And so when we mention that, someone knows someone that has participated
Yeah.
in this. And it's like, hey, we need to think differently about this risk. It's not just you as a person and your reputation as a person. It's the entire company that you're putting on the line.
So how does that work? They'll film someone in an act,
Right.
and then what?
And then they'll threaten to expose it online. And, so
And
these
they'll use them to get access to.
sensitive data,
Okay.
information,
Yeah, because
government
we
secrets.
get hacked, our company, all the time. People trying to get in from other countries, trying to learn what we do.
How powerful
Sure.
information can be.
Yeah. And this
so
is
that could be an application. Have we seen things like that?
So this is like, one of the oldest tricks in the book is sexpionage, right? And using sex as a way to gain information and access.
Yeah.
But not a lot of people are equating human trafficking and sexpionage in the same sentence or thought. And that's really the real risk here is the human element.
Yeah.
Because as the cybersecurity elements get boosted to make sure that you're not clicking on a link or you're doing good password hygiene, you may not think about your staff engaging in these facilities or that being a wide open area of risk for a corporation.
Wow.
Yeah. While we're on kind of the cyber element of it, I don't personally have kids, but I babysit a lot. I have nieces and nephews and godkids, and some of them are becoming teenagers, which is a whole other conversation, makes me feel old. But they're starting to want social media, and their parents are starting to come to me, and they're like, I know, once again, like we said, I know you work in sex trafficking, right? I'm like, no, I work against
the opposite.
But they're like, hey, yeah. So what do we do? What do we tell our kids? So I've had to have those conversations with both the kids I babysit and as well as their parents. What's maybe some of your advice for, or I don't know, maybe I want to talk a little bit about that because the threat online on TikTok and Instagram and every social media platform, it's not one in particular, that poses to our kids, I guess.
No doubt. And this is an area that we've had parents come to us and my wife and say, hey, how can we level up against this threat? Because I say, when my sister was nearly kidnapped, that was in the physical world. The threat today is in our homes via cyber.
Yeah.
And so there was a famous case recently with Roblox. A kid actually got kidnapped through connecting with an individual on Roblox, and these games, specifically with in-game chat or the ability to connect, poses a serious risk. And so what we tell parents is, don't fear, there are solutions out here, but it starts with building an environment of trust that you can have an open and honest conversation with your child. A lot of the bad things that happen with sextortion or is centered around shame. And these students or kids will send these intimate photos of themselves, and then once that information is shared, they find out that it's hardcore organized crime on the other side that's threatening their family or threatening to release these photos, right? And without a conversation in place, there's a lot of shame around that, as you can imagine, being 14, 15 years old and being wrapped up in this with organized crime. And so that's where we say this all starts with a conversation. And so families are starting to have this conversation around the dinner table. They're having it with their kids. They're having it with their schools or their churches, wherever will listen, because, we have to be able to create that safe environment for the child to say, hey, you know what, I did see something weird, or I slipped up and did this. And that trusting environment is a first line of protection for these kids.
So learning to respond appropriately is not what we might think, because the appropriate response in your mind is to be upset.
Right.
Yeah.
But you have to hold that back and have a conversation so that they feel safe enough to talk.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or maybe an instinct is to say, okay, fine, then no social media. But what I always tell my friends who are parents is kids are smart. Like,
Right. They'll
sorry,
find a
mom,
way.
but I had ways. If you took my phone, it's like, well, I still have chat on my book or notebook thing that I was using for school. Whatever they were called. But kids are smart, and often they'll find a friend who has a phone and can set them up an account. So I think having that open conversation so that when they encounter it, they can recognize it. Is so important.
That's exactly right. And the other thing that we talk about with parents is having a technology contract. Every time we use a social media app, we opt into that that long list of terms that we never read.
No clue what they say.
Right, exactly. So the same is true as like if your child is using your cell phone plan and you're paying for it, that perhaps there's a family contract that you co-craft with your children of, these are the sort of things, that we're going to use technologies to monitor, or this is what safe habits look like, or screen time, or, and each family contract can be tailored to the culture of the family, because each family is going to have different parameters that they're looking for. But having a contract in place for the usage of phone, the terms of use, is an important way that parents can interact with their children on technology.
It sounds like you're resetting the world we knew, which was stranger danger. Don't talk to strangers, and we'd never heard the story of why, but they find a way to talk about it where the kids can understand. I don't know why, I don't know what's happening but this is the danger thing. It's kind of an online digital as well as now relational, because you have to be able to, you're doing things that can't be seen. And so that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's typically going to be a parent or a guidance counselor that's going to hear this first. At least someone that can intervene as a first line of defense.
Right.
And so that's why working with schools and getting parents educated on this is so important.
Cool.
Yeah.
So tell us again the name of the book and where they can find it.
Yes, so the name of the book is Dark Traffic. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Someone just bought it on Google Play, so I guess every major platform that's out there.
You didn't know it was possible?
I didn't know it was possible to do that, but yes, you can get it on.
And the author, Noel Thomas. So thank you, Noel, for coming in.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you both for having me.
Thanks.
Yep.